my transition started 5 years before my NFL career ended. So I can remember year 4, I was starting internships. Year 5, I was trying to figure out, okay, what else am I passionate about other than football? Not saying that it took away from the passion I had for football. No, I still focused all my attention on what I needed to do. I still spent as much time as I needed to in the playbook. I was still there throughout the off season. But those first 3 months when I get done, okay, what is Allen about outside of football? And I really took the time to figure that out. I did an internship at Arizona State. I got to spend some time under some great guys there in the athletic department. I got to intern at Merrill Lynch. There are things that I was able to do while I was playing to kind of wet my palate and kind of see what drove me, what am I passionate about other than football. And like I said, everything that I did, somehow it took me back to real estate, but I took the time to explore that. The other thing I did was, like you said, being drafted in the 7th round, we're not guaranteed anything. I can remember my signing bonus was $37,000. That's not a lot in the NFL world when it comes to being drafted, in terms of what people getting. But for me, it was like, okay, I'm not guaranteed that my contract wasn't guaranteed ever, so it was kind of like, okay, what I have now, I need to make work. So for me, my way of investing while I was playing was saving. And I can remember the conversation I had with my financial advisor. And I said, for me, the biggest thing about investing is making sure when I put a dollar there, if I turn around 2 years, 3 years, 4 years later, I still have a dollar. I don't need to have $6. I already hit the home run. The home run was being in the NFL. For me, it's just saying, okay, how do I prepare myself for life when I'm done? So the transition period started way before I was done. It started with investing. It started with investing time in myself to figure out what else was really driving me. So by the time I got done, I didn't have to figure out right now, John, what I need to do to feed my family. I had time to explore because I had taken the time early in my career to put myself in a position that, okay, I can take this 3 or 4 years to really figure out how to make my business grow. From 17 to 21, no, we weren't banging it out, bringing money in, but I was able to invest in my business and not take from my business right away. So I put myself in a position while I was playing to really say, okay, give myself some time to really build myself when I'm done playing ball.
No, I appreciate that, Alec, because it's really helpful to understand that this process does not start, when you realize, hey, this career is ending, or I'm gonna end this soon. You got to really start that transition period a few years out. And anyone who, whether you are working a corporate job or you're in the military, I think that's something important to keep in mind. Start that process 4 to 5 years in front of when you actually want to transition.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's
Mm-hmm.
retirement, if it's a career change, if it's something else, you really need to start early. And it's actually interesting listening you talk about it because, we started our transition probably 6 or 7 years before I actually left corporate America. Started investing back in 2012, walked away from corporate America in 2018, 2019. So it was a ramp up period, right? And I wasn't sure that's what it was going to be. I think around 2016 is when I realized, okay, I think this is going to, at some point fairly soon, this is going to end and we're going to go here. But you really do need to start plotting that out and being very intentional about what you're going to do. You said something else I want to go back to, right? Being a 7th round draft pick, you got a $37,000 signing bonus, but your contract was not guaranteed. I think a lot of times people think about NFL athletes or any athlete in general and just assume everybody's rich, right? You see the contracts that some of these big guys get and they just assume people are rich. You talked about getting a $37,000 contract. Help us understand, the practice squad players, and I don't want to get super deep, but as a guy on the practice squad, what did you net that first year before you got kind of that first real big contract?
What did I net? Oh, it's
Well,
hard to
just
say.
what was your salary? Yeah, just what
I
you
can
make.
I can say this. I can say this. Being on practice squad in 2007, I was making $3,000 a week. And it's misleading, right? Because if you think about it, you say $3,000 a week. Oh, that's 52 weeks a year. You ain't doing that bad, right? The season is only 17 weeks. So I'm making $3,000 a week for 17 weeks. So what am I doing the remainder of the year? And that's where a lot of guys get in trouble, right? Because our salaries happen in 17 weeks. So that $3 million you may be getting for that year is happening in 17 weeks. So if you're spending $1 million a month, and you're only making $3 million that year, well, what about the other 4 or 5 months out the year that you're not getting paid? So it really comes into saying, okay, how do I set myself? And it took me some time. I was blessed. I'm not gonna lie, I was blessed because I wasn't this financially aware when I first started. You know, I know as a young age, I was a tither and I was a saver. That's something that my mom put in me very, very early. So I knew how to save and I knew how to tithe. Those are two things that no matter what I was going to do. But in terms of welcome to the league, there were things that I wanted to do to make me feel like, hey, look, I'm here. You know, and unfortunately, you know, when I first got there, I thought I had a hell of a training camp when I first got to Dallas. I thought I did really well, and the coaches even said it. But because of injuries and things that were out of my control, I made the 53-man roster that first day, and the next day I was on practice squad. So for me, it was like, okay, I had already counted in my head what I was making that first week. My first check was supposed to be $12,000 after game one. You know, I had already during training camp, I was already playing that out. Like, look, I know exactly what I'm buying with this first check that's coming. And then things change. You know, so what do I do now? You know, now it's like, okay, now you put an extra big chip on my shoulder because now not only did you mess with me in terms of what I feel like I am as a player, because I feel like I should be on this 53-man roster, but now you messing with my pockets too. So it became a constant thing of, okay, this is a battle. This is a battle. And I think that's why early in my career, it was a shift for me that it was never about the money because I was never the player that signed that huge contract. I was never the player that signed that multi-million-dollar extension. I was never that player. I always had to grind for whatever I had right in front of me and prove it. So I think practice squad that first year, that $3,000 a week up until like week 11 when I got finally activated, I had to figure out how to make it work. And, you know, it really was a lesson to expectations and how you set them financially. So yeah, it was $3,000 a week. You do the math, 17 weeks. I mean, you know, it's a long off season when that happens.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's just good for context because, you know, you had to sit there and figure out how do you make this stretch? What do you do in the off season? You said you were focused on football, but obviously you got to figure out your financial situation as well. So there's something to keep in mind, you know, that I think for all athletes, you know, and not just athletes, but any creator, you know, people who don't have a steady check coming in every week throughout the entire year. It's one of those things that you've got to budget and figure out how do you manage the funds that are coming in. Let's fast forward, right? So obviously you go from that stage, you get settled on the teams, you're on the 53-man roster, you're a starter in the league, you end up retiring. We talked about the transition a little bit there. So you had your eye on real estate. You knew you wanted to be, you know, give back in the city of Detroit and build and not have to touch that money for a little bit. What does that mean? When we talk about, you know, the work that you're doing right now in Detroit, just kind of give us a little bit more context of what it is exactly that you're doing.
So when I took a look at just the landscape of investing, right? When I first started investing, my idea was, okay, I was never an aggressive investor. I was always very conservative in terms of my investment strategies. So when I looked at real estate as a whole, my strategy was, okay, let me enter the game at a lower price point than what anybody else would because of the risk level, right? So if I'm buying my first house at $80,000 versus $330,000 in Houston, but getting the same demographic of people, you know, I'm lowering my risk in terms of what I'm putting out in terms of to get that return on the investment. So that was my key goal. It's like, how do I find what's right for me, right? Because I have money, you know, I had at that time finances, but I didn't want to just throw everything into one investment and say, let's let it ride. The other thing I'll caution people, and I know you touched on it earlier, is that transition, right? The one thing that I wish I would have known before I got done playing is that W-2 is power, right? Like your W-2 is power in that. You know, if you could take a W-2 to a lender, it's power and that's security for them, right? To know that, hey, look, you can pay this back. Now, don't get me wrong, you know, my W-2 was reading numbers that were off the charts when I was playing, but I wasn't taking that to the lender at the time, you know, other than to buy my first home. So when I got done, what happened to my returns and my W-2 income, it went like that because now I'm not playing anymore. So when I go to a lender, I can say, yeah, I have assets, I have cash, I have all of the things that I think make me a qualified investor to believe in me, to lend to me. But to them, they say, hey, look, you could spend that tomorrow. How do we get our money back? So before you make that jump, it's smart to think about, okay, is there a way for me to transition now while I still have the power of that W-2 or that 9 to 5 that I'm working every day? Because that's your power when you go to the bank. Your bank looks at your lending strength. Like, how can I lend to you? What do you pay me back? It's hard to go walk to a bank and say, okay, look, I got $60,000. I need a loan for $330,000. I got the down payment. Let's get it done. It doesn't work like that. So that's one thing I had to learn after I got done. But like I said, I lowered my risk in terms of where I could say I can go forward and purchase things with cash. So when I got to Detroit, it was like, okay, there was a need for landlords that cared. And I will say in Detroit, we have an issue since the price points are lower. People think that they can just throw money at the city, get the return on the investment, get the $1,000, $1,200 per rent and not care, right? Because I got somebody that's a renter, I'm good. But the need for me was to say, okay, these people need places to live too, places that they can love. I love my home. Every home I've ever lived in, I loved it and I've treated it like that. So the appreciation that I have for my home, I want other people to have. Even if they are renting for the time being, I still want them to have that appreciation for where they live. And eventually now where I'm at now is turning these people into homeowners. And that was always my goal. My goal wasn't to flood the city with a bunch of renters and properties that I owned. My goal when I started was to say, okay, let me rent these homes, find renters that are in qualified situations. Maybe their credit isn't that great. Maybe they're coming from a situation where they just need to work it out and get their finances together. How do I help these people one day become homeowners? And so in the back of my mind, I know, I'm talking kind of long on this one, but I do believe the strength and the success of your mission, a lot of it comes behind your true meaning and the true reason you do it. What's your mission? What's your mission behind what you're doing? My mission behind starting my business was to really help people become homeowners in the city of Detroit. And I really think the growth that I've had has come from my mission being surrounded around serving other people. And I think that that's a lot of why I'm so driven to invest in the city of Detroit and the people of Detroit, because I'm doing okay, John. Like I'm probably gonna be all right. But how can I serve someone else? And so tie that with the real estate and tie that with Detroit and tie that with my passion for home. I think that's kind of how it all came together and how I sit here right now.
Talk to us more about how, yeah, no, absolutely. Talk to us more about how you're helping people get to home ownership through the rental programs you've got.
Absolutely. So in a recent situation, there's a guy who has done pretty well financially. And like I said, his credit situation hasn't been that great. And his biggest thing was, okay, I come from being a homeowner, my situation changed. I have to find somewhere to live, but I want to get back to home ownership. I don't want to be a renter the rest of my life. And I looked at the property that I had and I said, okay, look, you want to rent this property. How can I be the bank? And so now through lease options and land contracts and that nature, and really setting it up to where it's beneficial to them, not to me as the investor, where for me, it's like, okay, I want to win. We all want to win as an investor, but there's a situation where we both can win. At the end of the day, you can become a homeowner. I got the equity piece that I needed, so be it. So I think really between that and finding a way to be the bank is how I've really helped people transition into home ownership. There's a guy that I do some work with that kind of helps people with their credit and, kind of puts them on a straight path. And it may not be a 12-month thing. It's maybe a 3-4 year process. But in the beginning, I always make sure that I look at what it would be for principal, insurance, taxes. And if your rent is, if that's what your rent is, we're already setting a precedent and where you need to be at. If we can train ourselves to pay this every month on the first, when it becomes time for you to be a homeowner, you can own that home that you're in. That home that you're in, you can own it. And I think for me, I found in this where, I was blessed to be able to have a lot of my properties where, I'm 100% in terms of equity. But there are some properties now that, I'm seeing, okay, the return isn't the same because I do have a lender involved. Or these are the properties that I can take the opportunity to make homeowners out of in those properties. And that's kind of how I made that shift. It was like, okay, I want to continue investing, but now the market is changing. Every property I can't get right now will be 100% equity, and I just can't do it right now. So, okay, if I have to include a lender, now I'm just that middleman for that person trying to be that homeowner. So I think it's really when I first started doing it, I didn't know how it would look. And I can remember talking to my accountant, we were talking about it. And my first thing was, okay, we'll take one of the properties you own 100%, let's just do it, but that's not the biggest win, in terms of everybody winning. So it became a situation, okay, let's use the bank as the big bank, I'll be the little bank, and then we can make this work for people that want to become homeowners. So
No, I love that.
yeah, it's coming together. Like I said, I'm still I'm still getting it together and still moving. Like I said, I have a couple people that are in this program now. And yeah, man, I think it's going to be really, really good if I can really get it to take off.
No, I love it because you're giving an opportunity for people to clean up the credit, get that payment history together, and then actually just take over a home, right? So even though they're renting what could be their home, and you're making it easy for them. So I think that's really powerful, and it's something that many people can think about as another strategy. And it's not charity. I mean, you're setting it up where it's a win-win for both parties, and I think that's really key. The beauty of real estate is it doesn't have to be, if I win, you lose, or if you win, I lose. It can definitely be a win-win situation. You just have to be a little bit creative about how you think about it.
And that's key. And I can remember kind of one situation that kind of really thrusted me into this. And it was actually I want to say 2 or 3 years ago. I was buying a property, and it was in the suburbs of Detroit. And I went to look at this property, and outside of my primaries and my properties that I live in, I haven't used lenders much in terms of banks, in terms of getting a loan for homes, mortgages. So I started working with a bank in the Michigan area, and you know after I got done, now the loan got approved. I didn't get the rate I thought I should have, and I think there were a lot of things that played into it. But I can remember calling my mom after, and I said, I feel I felt like a criminal through the process. I felt like a criminal. Now I look at my assets. Now I look at where I'm at. There's no reason I should feel like that. But the process that they put me through, in terms of the vigor, in terms of the documentation, in terms of all of the things that they put me through, and I'm qualified. I'm qualified. Like, I ain't no knock on. I know I'm qualified. I can take my portfolio. I'm confident in that. But the process that they put me through, it really set me back to say, well, if somebody didn't have my portfolio, what would they do? Like, what would they do if they weren't me? Because everything they needed, I had it. Whatever you're gonna request, I got it. We can make this as long or as short as you want to go, but I'm gonna get this loan, whether it's you or somebody else. It's nothing that I don't have. But it really made me think, like, okay, well, if I didn't have that 401k, if I didn't have these rental properties in terms of income, if I didn't have all of these things that make my portfolio what it is, what would I do? And that's kind of what got my brain to start working, to say, okay, because I actually took a break with my LO, researched the CEO, and gave the CEO of company of the bank a call. And I had to tell him, I said, look, man, there's no reason I should feel like a criminal through your process, through your lending process. And that's exactly how I felt. He said, Alan, when you come up here, give me a call. We can sit down and we can have lunch. We can figure out how to make this situation better. Because what you went through, you wouldn't. He adjusted the interest rate, which is unheard of. Like, it should have been that from the jump, but he adjusted that after because I discussed exactly what happened in the process that I had to go through, the documentation that it's almost illegal to ask for. But that enlightened me to say, okay, look, I know what I look like, right? Right. What if somebody looks like me with less? What do they do? Do they have a chance at getting this home? And that kind of thrusted me into another mode of thinking, in terms of how can I be an investor for the people, not just for myself. And so that's kind of where I'm at now.
No, I appreciate you sharing that story. I mean, it's one that many people, experience and are somewhat familiar with, and it doesn't get talked about very often. There's actually a couple different articles and stories right now about appraisal and appraisal discrimination and things like that that come into play, and that's kind of where you run into it, because you're right. Somebody can be qualified on paper. It doesn't mean that that process is going to go smooth, especially in a residential space. And that
Mm-hmm.
can be a challenge for a lot of people, especially if you don't have that W-2, or if there's other things that make it more complex for you to qualify. So appreciate you sharing that. And if
Yeah.
there's something that we can take as a lesson there or learning there, definitely want to make sure people can reach out and learn more about it. Alan, real quick, for folks who want to learn a little bit more about your story, they can email you, I believe, at alan18ball@gmail.com. I want to switch gears just a little bit. Well, one, let's talk about this first. As we're talking now, it's the NFL all season. The draft is right around the corner here. If you could talk to some of those prospects, not necessarily those first and second round guys who going to get guaranteed money, but some of those mid to late round picks, the young guys coming in focused, or even some of those veterans, right? Guys who've been in the league for a few years, but maybe like you, came in, had to scrape their way to make it in. What would you tell them to do differently, or that they could learn from your story to make sure they set themselves up for life outside of football?
Just start preparing yourself now. I think that's the biggest thing. I think figuring out a way to figure out what you're passionate about. Like I spoke about earlier, don't make it a rush to the finish when you're finished, right? Like if it can start now, and it doesn't have to start with finding that investment opportunity that just knocks it out the ballpark. That's not where it has to start. It can start with you just saving. Just save, just put some money aside, and that's where it can start. And I think a lot of times we're trying to figure out how we can make our money grow. The NFL has a 401k savings plan like no other. Dollar for dollar. We're matching plus when you put into it. Start investing in that now. That money that I look at that I started investing in 2007, I could never imagine what my balance is, why it would be where it's at now. But at the time, you're short sighted and saying, okay, well, this is $10,000 that it's not going to be in my pocket. But that $10,000, 10 years later, it's worth a lot more than what you could imagine it would be, even just riding the waves of a target date fund. So take the time right now you don't have to have it figured out. That's not what it's about. It's not about playing right now and saying, oh, when I'm done, I'm going to do this. That's not what it's about. What it's about is figuring out when I'm done, how much time will I have to figure it out? How much time will I have to say, I'm not in a rush to figure out how to pay my bills? That's setting it up, and make sure that you're living within your means. A lot of times, retirement isn't for us because we don't retire on our own. We're not wanted anymore. So retirement happens because we don't have another option. So, make sure your next option is for you, and that's one of the biggest things I can say is really make sure that you give yourself time when you're done playing for yourself.
There you go. Appreciate that, Alan. For those folks who are not necessarily big football fans,
Hmm.
and obviously everybody listening to this is a fan of real estate in some capacity, or they wouldn't be
Hmm.
listening.
Yeah,
But they may recognize you or your name from one other place, right? I mean, you
yeah,
spent
yeah.
a little bit of time outside of football doing something else. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I guess you mentioned the Survivor thing.
That's right.
Yeah, that was a transition. Like I said, I went to a lot of different arenas when I got done. One of those was Survivor. It was a great experience, man. I really think, if I can look back at that experience and say anything, it gave me a really good amount of time of reflection, being away from everything, being closed off to the world, and really being able to spend time with myself and compete at the same time. And I think, a lot of times those nights, just being out there and just saying, okay, what am I doing when I get back? Really setting a plan and really sit down and analyzing exactly where you're at in life. And I think it happened at the perfect time. It's something that was really out of body for me, if for anybody that knows me. But man, it was a great experience. And it was one of those things where if you ever have an opportunity to do something outside of yourself that you completely think is not you, do it, because you'll learn something about yourself that in the meantime you just didn't know.
I gotta tell you, man, I think about you growing up in Detroit. I think about you traveling around the league, staying at nice hotels and, going out in the middle of the wilderness with a knife and some sticks, to survive just seems like a far stretch. I mean, how much of that is like, is that just like the real experience? You're just out there and good luck will make sure you don't die? Or like, did y'all really have little tents that y'all would sleep in outside of the show?
See, that second part is what I thought it was.
You thought it was just TV production.
That's what I thought it was. Until you out there and you at 8 and you gotta really work for your food and really rely on the person that can swim and figure out how to spear a fish. I really thought it was a porta potty somewhere that I could use when I had to. Nah, that don't exist though. You know what I mean? Like you really going out there in the ocean, and it's much realer than what people would think, man. And that's why I said the experience was definitely intact. They're not gonna let you die. Like you still on CBS time. They're not gonna let you die, but they're gonna let you get every experience that you could possibly have out there in the open. So yeah, it was definitely good, man. And I wouldn't do it again, but I'm definitely glad I did it the first time.
So when they call for those special shows, you say don't call me.
Nah, don't call me on that one. I'm good on that. I'm good. I'm good. Yeah.
I love it, man. I love it. I appreciate that. Let's jump into our round of insights. Alan, give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
That first lender saying no. I really look back and say, okay, when you get into the lending game, right? And I know it's preached on, which is fine. It's using other people's money. How do I use other people's money? How do I do this and use other people's money? So when I first got in, it was how do I use other people's money? Until other people said, no, you can't use our money. Okay, I got to use my own. But when I started using my own, I look back and 4 years later, I don't owe anybody anything. But I'm collecting money every month, so I'm looking at my return on my investment. Yeah, I went cash in, and a lot of people can feel different ways about how that's done. But I'm looking now back from the perspective of, okay, yes, I know I could have built equity on someone else's money, but I mean, I'm very, very debt averse, and I believe in that, and that's something that I kind of try to stand by as much as I can, unless there's absolute necessity. But like I said, until somebody told me no, I wouldn't know another way to do it. Everything I read told me one way to do it. Everything I studied told me one way to do it until somebody told me no. And I had to figure out another way. So what was a failure to me at the time, the frustration that I had when I was talking to my wife about it, yeah, it seemed like a failure. Like, how do I get this thing going if won't nobody give me, like, that's what I felt like. But looking back on it, I mean, it was one of the best things that could have happened to me.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
I would say any platform that provides, I'm a big fan of this platform called Buildium. And it's a platform that I use that, don't get me wrong, my mom was an accountant. So when I first started, I had all of this structure in terms of how I should be structuring things with my properties and keeping track of things. And when it came time to do taxes, we had 102 Excel sheets that we had to figure out how to put together because we was keeping everything on Excel. But I think, that platform really took me to the next step in terms of management. And not only management of my properties, but now I was in a space where, man, this is so easy. I can start managing other people's properties too. So I think that platform for me was a huge factor to my growth and to my success now.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Bible. There's a devotional Bible that, and I want to say 2020, and I know I'm supposed to be quick right now, 2020 or 2019, I told one of my goals at the beginning of the new year was sit down and read a devotional every day and meditate. And since 2019, January, I've seen such growth in myself, such growth in my life, such growth just in who I am. I believe in it so much. I bought it for 2 of my homeboys that next Christmas in 2019. This past Christmas, I bought it for 2 more of my homeboys. It's a devotional Bible. I wish I had one right here, but it just gives you a devotion. It gives you a scripture to read. It gives you a devotion to read after it. And, I really believe what we feed ourselves is what comes out. And just like breakfast. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, love that. Give me the daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
Prayer.
There we go. What you talked a little bit about, your approach and your strategy. Give me your number one insight for investing.
Number one insight for investing would be for me is know your goals. Like, right, everybody's good at doing a lot of things, and that's the thing about real estate. Like you said, there's something for everybody, but that something for everybody doesn't have to be your way of doing things. That return on investment doesn't have to be your goal return on investment. Just because you see a house and it doesn't meet that number that everybody says is the number you need to have for an investment, doesn't mean it's not a great investment. It doesn't mean it's not a great opportunity for you. So know your goal, know your reason for investing, and know what you want to get out of it. A lot of reading and a lot of things can go into it. There are a lot of internet articles. There are a lot of things we can look at, but know your mission, and know your goals.
All right, we're going to lighten it up a little bit, man. You are based in Houston now. You still spend a lot of time in Detroit. Detroit's home as well. Give me the best place to grab a bite to eat, and I'm going to let you pick which city.
Oh, man, that's tough, man. I'm a foodie, too. The best place, I want to say one of the best places in Detroit to grab something to eat, and I know it's going to be Lou's Deli. If you're a fan of corned beef sandwiches, I got away from Lou's Deli and I went back maybe a couple months ago, and I was like, I don't know how I've been missing you all this long, but Lou's Deli probably has some of the best corned beef sandwiches in the city. So I definitely say if you can find a Lou's Deli when you're in Detroit, just stop by and grab a corned beef sandwich.
All right, you're the first person I'm gonna ask this follow-up to, but after you left Survivor, where did you go first to eat? Because I'm sure you were ready for a real meal. So where was that first real meal?
Oh man, I had a pizza. I had a pizza when I first left. Star Pizza is what we went to. Deep dish pizza from Star Pizza here in Houston. That was the first place we went to grab eat. My wife was like, "That's what you want?" I was like, "Yeah, we have Star Pizza, a deep dish, and I want it exactly like I want it. We can do the steak and all that other stuff. We can do that later, but I want pizza." I had pizza and a piece of cheesecake. That was what it was. So, yeah, that's what it was.
That's amazing. Well, Alan, listen, man, I appreciate you coming on the show today. Talk a little bit about your NFL journey, talking about your NFL journey, how you went from 7th round practice squad to starter, 9-year career, and started working that transition, around 4 or 5 years into your career, and how you took that to really start building up your real estate firm, Next Phase Investments, and really all the things that you're doing now to grow and creating unique opportunities for your renters to also become homeowners, and just really being creative about how you stack your capital, how you invest your time, your energy, your money, and getting a return, not just for you, but also the community you serve. Again, for folks who want to learn more about you, they can reach out at alan18ball@gmail.com. Alan is ALAN. Alan, I just want to thank you again for coming on the show, being open and honest today. We hope you have a good one. Take care, man.
I appreciate you, John. Thanks again.